Amira Johnson walked into Carter's elite martial arts academy wearing worn sneakers and carrying an old gym bag, but Sensei Marcus Carter took one look at her humble appearance and decided she didn't belong when he called her to the front of the class as a joke, daring her to demonstrate techniques she couldn't possibly know. The entire room erupted in laughter, and Carter smiled, confidently waiting for the embarrassment to unfold. But there was something none of them understood about this quiet 10-year-old girl standing calmly in the center of that mat. And in the next 60 seconds, Amira was about to silence every doubt, every whisper, and every condescending smile in that room forever. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Carter's elite martial arts academy in downtown Atlanta, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The dojo was everything a martial arts school should look like on the surface. White uniforms moved in synchronized patterns. Framed photographs of tournament champions lined the walls, each one showing Sensei Marcus Carter shaking hands with victorious students, holding up trophies, standing proud in front of state championship banners. The air smelled of floor wax and dedication, and the sound of bare feet sliding across mats created a rhythm that spoke of discipline and order. Sensei Carter stood at the front of the class, his arms crossed over his chest. He was a man in his late 40s, with graying hair cut military short and a physique that suggested he still trained as hard as his students. His black belt was worn and faded in places, a badge of honor that showed decades of practice. Around his waist, the fabric had softened from countless hours of sweat and movement. Mental toughness separates champions from amateurs, Carter announced to the assembled students, his voice carrying authority that came from years of teaching. Physical strength means nothing if your mind breaks under pressure. I've seen grown men crumble in competitions because they didn't have the mental discipline. That's what we build here. That's what makes this dojo different from the rest. The students, about 20 of them ranging from ages 8 to 17, nodded solemnly. Most have been training here for years. Their families paid premium membership fees for the privilege of learning from a sensei who had produced regional champions. This wasn't just a place to learn self-defense. It was a status symbol, a place where Atlanta's more affluent families sent their children to build character and confidence. Tyler Brennan sat in the front row, his posture perfect, his expression serious. At 13, he was already one of the advanced students, wearing his brown belt with visible pride. His father owned 3 car dealerships across the city and never missed an opportunity to remind Carter that the Brennan family donations had funded the new equipment room. Tyler had inherited his father's confidence and his tendency to look down on anyone he considered beneath him. The door at the back of the dojo opened with a soft creak. The sound cut through Carter's speech like a knife. Every head turned. The synchronized rhythm of the class broke apart as whispers began to ripple through the students. A woman stepped inside first. She was in her early 30s, wearing the uniform of someone who worked long hours for modest pay. Her name tag from the diner was still pinned to her shirt. Amira Johnson moved with quiet dignity, but there was tiredness in her eyes that spoke of double shifts and unpaid bills. Behind her, clutching an old gym bag that looked like it had seen better days, was a little girl. Amira Johnson was 10 years old, small for her age, with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a faded red t-shirt and sneakers that were clean but worn at the edges. Her eyes were wide as she took in the dojo, scanning the photographs on the walls, the students in their crisp uniforms, the pristine mats that probably cost more than her mother's monthly rent. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Carter's expression shifted from surprise to something harder to read. He walked toward the door, his footsteps deliberate. "Can I help you?" His tone was polite, but there was an edge to it. Danielle stepped forward, her voice steady despite the obvious intimidation of the space. "I called earlier this week. About trial lessons? You said we could come by today to see if it would be a good fit, right?" Carter glanced down at Amira, then back at Danielle. "I remember now. Johnson, was it?" "Yes, sir. This is my daughter, Amira." Carter studied the little girl for a long moment. His eyes took in the worn clothing, the second-hand bag, the way she stood slightly behind her mother. "This isn't a playground," he said finally, his voice carrying across the quiet dojo. "Martial arts requires discipline, dedication, and commitment. It's not something you just try out for fun." A few of the students snickered. Tyler leaned over to whisper something to the boy next to him, and both of them grinned. Amira stepped out from behind her mother. She looked directly at Carter and bowed, her form surprisingly correct for someone who claimed to be a beginner. "Yes, Sensei," she said softly, her voice clear and respectful. "I came to learn." The confidence in those simple words caught Carter off guard. For just a moment, something flickered across his face that might have been surprise or uncertainty. But he covered it quickly with a slight smirk. "We'll see about that. Classes are expensive here. We run a professional program." "I understand," Danielle said. "You mentioned on the phone there might be scholarship options or work trade arrangements." Carter's jaw tightened slightly. Work trade meant she couldn't afford the regular fees. It meant she was asking for charity. "We can discuss that later. For now, why don't you both have a seat over there?" He gestured to a bench near the wall. "Watch how a real class operates." Danielle guided Amira to the bench. They sat down quietly while Carter returned to the front of the class. "All right, everyone back to positions. We're moving into sparring drills. Advanced students, pair up." The class resumed its rhythm. Students bowed to their partners and began controlled sparring exercises. The sound of strikes being blocked, feet pivoting, and controlled breathing filled the space. Carter walked between the pairs, offering corrections, adjusting stances, nodding approval at clean techniques. Amira watched everything with intense focus. Her eyes tracked each movement, following the flow of attacks and defenses. When one student executed a particularly smooth combination, her fingers twitched slightly, as if her body wanted to mirror the motion. From the corner of his eye, Carter noticed her attention. Most visitors watched martial arts sparring with casual interest, maybe some admiration for the flashier moves. But this girl was studying. Her gaze wasn't wandering to the trophies or the other decorations. She was absorbing every technical detail. When no one was looking directly at her, Amira's hand moved in a small gesture, tracing the path of a block she'd just seen. Her foot shifted slightly, testing the weight distribution of his stance. Tyler finished his sparring round and noticed her movements. "Hey, check it out," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "The charity case thinks she knows karate." Several students laughed. Carter heard the comment, but didn't correct it. Instead, he looked over at Amira with something that resembled amusement. "You think you can do that, little one?" The question hung in the air. Danielle tensed beside her daughter. "She's just watching, she doesn't." "I can try," Amira said quietly. Carter's smirk widened. This was too perfect. A teaching moment about humility, about knowing your place, about the difference between watching and doing. "Come on then. Show us what you've got." "Amira, honey, you don't have to," Danielle whispered urgently. But Amira was already standing. She set down her old gym bag and walked onto the mat. The other students formed a loose circle, some curious, most expecting entertainment at her expense. Tyler crossed his arms, grinning widely. Amira stood in the center of the mat and bowed to Carter. Then she settled into a ready stance. Carter's smirk faltered for just a second. Her stance was too good, too balanced. The weight distribution was correct, her hands positioned properly, her center of gravity low and stable. "That wasn't something you picked up from watching. Where did you learn to stand like that?" he asked, his tone sharper than before. "My dad taught me before he left," Amira answered simply. "Your dad taught you?" Carter nodded slowly. "All right then, let's see what else Daddy taught you." He gestured to a senior student named Marcus, a 17-year-old green belt. "Marcus, light sparring. Very light. Just see what she knows." Marcus stepped forward, looking uncomfortable with the situation. He was a good kid, didn't usually enjoy these kinds of displays. But he bowed to Amira and moved into position. The match began with Marcus throwing a slow, controlled punch. It was the kind of strike you'd use with a complete beginner, testing their reflexes more than anything else. Amira didn't panic. She didn't flinch. She simply wasn't there when the punch arrived. Her movement was minimal but precise, shifting her body just enough to let the strike pass by her shoulder. Before Marcus could reset, her hand came up in a perfect counterstrike, stopping inches from his ribs with controlled precision. The dojo went completely silent. Marcus blinked in surprise. He tried again, this time with a low kick, still pulling his power but moving faster. Amira sidestepped, her feet moving in a pattern that was too smooth, too practiced. Her counter was a gentle tap to his shoulder, demonstrating she could have struck harder but chose restraint. Carter's smile had vanished entirely. His arms uncrossed. Around the room, the whispers started again, but these were different. These carried confusion and surprise. "Where did you learn that?" Carter demanded, his voice hard. Amira turned to face him, lowering her hands. "My dad taught me before he left," she repeated. There was no pride in her voice, no boasting. Just a simple statement of fact. "Left where? Who is your father?" Danielle stood up from the bench, moving toward her daughter. His name was Amira Johnson. He passed away 3 years ago. The past tense registered with Carter, and his expression softened slightly, though the suspicion remained. "And he taught her martial arts." "He was military," Danielle said quietly. "He trained soldiers. And yes, he started teaching Amira when she was very young." Carter studied Amira again, this time with different eyes. Military training explained some of it, but not all. The girl's technique was too refined, too controlled for casual instruction. This spoke of hours of dedicated practice, of muscle memory built over years. Class dismissed, Carter said abruptly. Everyone hit the showers. "Good work today." The students hesitated, clearly wanting to stay and see what would happen next. But Carter's tone left no room for argument. They bowed and dispersed toward the locker rooms, though their whispered conversations continued. Tyler looked back over his shoulder, his expression dark with resentment. Once the main floor cleared, Carter approached Danielle and Amira. "I need to be honest with you. We don't typically take students with previous training from unknown sources. There could be bad habits that are hard to break." "Understand," Danielle said, gathering Amira's bag. "Thank you for your time." "I didn't say no." Carter paused. "Bring her back tomorrow. Same time. I want to see more of what she knows. We'll figure out the payment situation after I evaluate her properly." Danielle nodded, surprised but grateful. "Thank you. We'll be here." As they walked toward the door, Carter called out Amira. She turned back, standing straight. "Your father," Carter said, his tone less harsh than before. "What did he teach you about martial arts? What did he say was most important?" Amira thought for a moment. "He said control is stronger than power." Carter nodded slowly. "Come back tomorrow." Outside, the late afternoon sun was warm on their faces. Danielle and Amira walked toward the bus stop in silence. Finally, Danielle spoke, her voice low and worried. "Baby, you promised me. No fighting." Amira looked up at her mother, her expression innocent. "He started it." Danielle wanted to argue, wanted to remind her daughter about staying invisible, about not drawing attention. But she'd seen the look in Carter's eyes at the end. Respect, curiosity, maybe even the beginning of admiration. She squeezed Amira's hand and said nothing more. The morning after Amira's demonstration, Marcus Carter sat alone in his office at the dojo before any students arrived. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, forgotten on the desk while he stared at his computer screen. The dojo's security footage played on loop, showing yesterday's encounter from 3 different angles. He watched Amira's movements again and again. The way she shifted her weight, the economy of motion, the perfect timing of her counters. Carter had trained hundreds of students over 20 years. He'd seen natural talent before. But this was different. This wasn't raw potential waiting to be shaped. This was refined technique that should have taken years to develop. He paused the video on a frame showing Amira's stance. Her back foot was positioned at exactly the right angle. Her center of gravity was perfect. Even her breathing had been controlled and steady throughout the exchange. Where the hell did she learn that? He muttered to himself. Carter opened a new browser window and typed in Amira Johnson military martial arts. The search returned dozens of results, but most were too common. He needed more information. He added special forces to the search. The third result made him lean forward. It was an old article from a military publication, dated 6 years ago. The headline read, "Special Forces Instructor Develops Hybrid Combat System." The photograph showed a black man in army fatigues demonstrating a technique to a group of soldiers. The caption identified him as Sergeant First Class Amira Johnson. Carter clicked through to the article and began reading. Amira Johnson had been an instructor at Fort Benning, specializing in hand-to-hand combat training for Special Forces candidates. The article describes something called the flow technique, a hybrid system that combined traditional martial arts with practical combat applications. It emphasized adaptability, emotional control, and using an opponent's energy against them. Jesus Carter vispired. That's what she was doing. He read further. Amira Johnson had been killed in action during a deployment to Afghanistan. There was no mention of a family, no mention of a daughter who'd been learning his techniques since she was barely old enough to walk. Carter closed the laptop and sat back in his chair. He'd mocked her, called her a charity case, let his students laugh at her worn clothes and humble demeanor. And all along, she'd been carrying the legacy of a genuine warrior. Shame flickered through him, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Opportunity. A student with that kind of background, that kind of raw skill, could bring prestige to his dojo, could win competitions, could prove that his teaching methods could take exceptional talent and make it extraordinary. He picked up his phone and dialed the number Danielle had left. She answered on the third ring, her voice tired. "Hello, Ms. Johnson. This is Sensei Carter from the academy. I wanted to follow up about Amira." There was a pause. Background noise suggested she was at work, probably on a break. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right. I'd like to offer Amira a free week of classes. Full access to all our programs. I want to properly evaluate her potential and see where she might fit in our competitive training track." Another pause, longer this time. "That's very generous. What's the catch?" Carter allowed himself a small smile. She was protective and smart. "No catch. I don't often see natural talent like hers. I'd like to explore it further. If she progresses well, we could discuss scholarship options for continued training. Can I think about it and call you back?" "Of course. But Ms. Johnson, your daughter has something special. It would be a shame not to develop it properly." After they hung up, Carter felt satisfied. He'd played it perfectly. Generous, but not desperate. Complimentary, but professional. She'd agree. He was certain of it. What he didn't see was Danielle sitting in the break room of Jerry's diner, staring at her phone with a mixture of hope and fear. On the wall behind her hung her jacket, and in its pocket was a photograph she carried everywhere. Malik in his uniform, smiling at the camera, his black belt visible beneath his military insignia. He looked so proud, so alive. She'd promised herself after he died that Amira would have a normal life. No more late-night training sessions that left their daughter exhausted. No more drills that pushed a child's body to its limits. Malik had been obsessed with perfection, with creating something that would outlast him. And now he was gone, leaving behind a 10-year-old girl who moved like a trained soldier. But she also remembered the joy in Amira's eyes yesterday when she stepped onto that mat. The confidence, the sense of purpose. Maybe normal wasn't what her daughter needed. Danielle looked at the phone one more time, then made her decision. That afternoon, when the dojo opened for evening classes, Amira walked through the door again. This time the whispers were immediate. Students who'd witnessed yesterday's demonstration nudged each other and pointed. Some expressions showed respect. Others showed resentment. Tyler Brennan stood near the equipment wall with 2 of his friends. When Amira entered, he muttered just loud enough to be heard, "Lucky hit." That's all it was. His friend Jason laughed. "Yeah, probably just got scared and swung wild." Marcus went easy on her. Amira heard them, but kept walking. She set her bag down on the same bench and removed her sneakers, placing them carefully beneath the seat. She wore the same red t-shirt and simple black athletic pants. While other students had matching gym bags and personalized water bottles, she had an old plastic bottle refilled from the tap. Carter emerged from his office and clapped his hands once, sharp and commanding. "Line up." Standard warm-up routine. The students assembled in neat rows by rank. Amira stood at the back, uncertain of where beginners belonged. Carter gestured for her to move forward. "Front row today. I want to watch your form." She complied, feeling the weight of 20 pairs of eyes on her back. The warm-up began with basic stretches, progressing into fundamental stances. Carter walked between the rows, correcting postures, adjusting angles. When he reached Amira, he stopped. "Show me a forward stance." She dropped into position smoothly. Her front knee bent at the precise angle, her back leg locked and strong, her upper body balanced perfectly over her hips. Carter said nothing, but something flickered in his expression. He moved to the next student and corrected their stance, then returned to Amira. Horse stance. Again, her execution was flawless. She sank low, her thighs parallel to the ground, her back straight, her weight distributed evenly. She held it without trembling while Carter counted to 30. "Where did your father serve?" Carter asked quietly while she held the position. "Afghanistan," Amira answered, her breathing controlled despite the burn in her legs. "In Georgia, at Fort Benning. He was an instructor." Carter nodded. "You can stand." The warm-up continued, but Carter kept glancing at Amira. Every stance, every movement showed the same impossible precision. This wasn't beginner's luck. This was systematic training that had been drilled until it became instinct. At the back of the dojo, near the door to Carter's office, an older man stood watching. He was in his 70s, Asian, with white hair and a weathered face that spoke of a lifetime devoted to martial arts. His name was Thomas Leung, and he'd been Carter's mentor decades ago, when Carter was still a student hungry to prove himself. Tyler slapped her hand away and scrambled to his feet, his face burning with humiliation. "That wasn't part of the drill. You broke form first," Amira said quietly. "I just responded." Carter's voice cut through the tension. "Tyler, sit out the rest of this round. Cool off." Tyler's jaw clenched, but he couldn't argue. He walked to the side of the mat, his fists balled at his sides. Several students watched him with expressions ranging from sympathy to poorly concealed amusement. After class, while students filed out to the locker rooms, Leung approached Carter. They stood together near the office door, watching Amira help stack practice mats. "That girl," Leung said softly, his accent still carrying traces of his childhood in Hong Kong. "She moves like someone who's trained in something older than your belt system." Carter frowned. Her father taught her. Military combatives, practical application. "No," Leung shook his head. "There's more. The way she breathes, the way she centers herself. That's not modern military. That's classical foundation. Someone taught her patience. Someone taught her to see 3 moves ahead." He paused. "Someone taught her what I try to teach you, Marcus." The words stung more than Carter wanted to admit. "I teach discipline and winning. That's what builds successful students. You teach competition. There's a difference." Leung gestured toward Amira. "She could win every tournament you enter her in, but that's not what she's training for. Can you see that?" Carter didn't answer. He didn't know how to answer. Everything in his dojo was built around competition success. Trophies brought in new students. Championship titles justified premium pricing. Winning was how you proved your worth. But watching Amira carefully fold a practice mat, her movements precise and respectful even when no one was watching, something uncomfortable shifted in his chest. Leung patted his shoulder. "I'll be back next week. Think about what you're really teaching here." After he left, Carter stood alone on the empty mat. Through the windows, he could see Danielle arriving to pick up Amira. Mother and daughter walked to the old car parked in the far corner of the lot, their conversation too distant to hear. That evening, Tyler sat in his father's expensive SUV, arms crossed and fuming. His father, Richard Brennan, was on his phone, barely paying attention to his son's complaints. "She's not even supposed to be there, Dad. She's only there because Carter's giving her charity. It's not fair." Richard finished his call and glanced at his son. "Did she cheat?" "What?" "No, but..." "Did she break rules?" "No, but she..." "Then she beat you fair and square." Richard started the engine. "Don't complain about losing. Get better so you win next time. That's how the world works." Tyler slumped in his seat, the humiliation of the day burning deeper. Getting beaten was bad enough. Getting beaten by someone his father dismissed with "get better" was worse. And the worst part was knowing that every student in that dojo had seen it happen. He pulled out his phone and opened a group chat with Jason and 2 other students. The message he typed was simple: "Tomorrow we make the charity case quit." That night, while most of Atlanta slept, Amira couldn't sleep. The excitement of the day had left her restless. She slipped out of her bedroom, through the small apartment she shared with her mother, and out the back door that led to a tiny concrete courtyard. Under the weak light of a single street lamp, she began moving through forms. Not the basic ones from class, but deeper sequences her father had taught her. Movements that felt like dancing, where each stance flowed into the next without pause. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, patient and strong. "Control is stronger than power, baby girl. Remember that. Anyone can throw a punch. But can you throw a punch and choose not to? Can you win a fight by making your opponent defeat themselves? That's real strength." She moved faster, her breathing steady, her mind quiet. The world fell away until there was only motion and breath and the memory of her father's smile. Inside, Danielle watched through the window. She saw her daughter's shadow moving across the concrete, saw the discipline and grace that Malik had somehow instilled in their child. Pride and fear warred in her chest. Pride because Amira was extraordinary. Fear because extraordinary often meant difficult, meant standing out, meant becoming a target. She whispered to the empty room, to the photograph of Malik on the shelf, "I hope I'm doing the right thing." The shadow continued to move outside, tireless and focused, carrying a legacy that refused to be forgotten. The next morning arrived with tension thick enough to cut. Amira walked into the dojo carrying her old gym bag, unaware of what Tyler and his friends had planned. She went straight to the bench where she'd been leaving her things, but something was wrong. Her sneakers, which she'd placed carefully beneath the seat yesterday, were gone. She looked around, confused. Other students were arriving, changing into their training clothes, but no one met her eyes. Tyler stood near the water fountain with Jason and 2 others, smirking but pretending to be engaged in conversation. "Lost something?" Tyler called out innocently. Amira's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She checked under other benches, behind equipment bags, even in a lost and found box near Carter's office. Her sneakers had simply vanished. She'd have to train barefoot today, which wasn't a problem technically, but the message was clear. "You don't belong here." Carter emerged from his office and noticed the commotion. "Problem, Amira?" "No, Sensei," she said quietly, setting down her bag. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of complaining. The morning class began with Carter's usual intensity, but today felt different. Every time Amira executed a technique perfectly, whispers followed. When Carter paired her with advanced students for demonstrations, some of them went harder than necessary, testing her limits. She handled it all with quiet dignity, never complaining, never showing frustration. During a water break, Jason accidentally bumped into her, spilling his water bottle across her gym bag. "Oops, sorry charity case," he muttered, walking away before she could respond. Amira pulled her father's photograph from the bag quickly, drying it on her shirt before the water could damage it further. The photo was one of her most precious possessions. Malik in his uniform, his black belt visible, his smile bright with pride. She tucked it safely into the dry pocket of her bag and said nothing. By lunchtime, Carter had seen enough of the subtle harassment. He called Danielle, his voice clipped and professional. "Ms. Johnson, I need you to come to the dojo this afternoon. We need to discuss Amira's background more thoroughly." Danielle arrived an hour later, still wearing her diner uniform, worry evident in her expression. Carter led her into his office and closed the door. Through the glass window, Amira could see them talking, her mother's face growing more defensive as the conversation continued. "You told me your husband taught her casually," Carter said, pulling up the military article on his computer screen. "This says he was a special forces instructor who developed an entire combat system. That's not casual teaching." Danielle's voice rose slightly. "I didn't lie. I said he was military and he trained soldiers. You didn't ask for details. Details matter. If she's been trained in advanced military techniques since she was 4 years old, That changes everything about how I evaluate her. Are you saying she can't train here? Carter leaned back in his chair, studying Danielle carefully. I'm saying I need to know exactly what I'm working with. Her technique is too refined for her age. If she's carrying techniques designed for combat soldiers, I need to know how to properly channel that. Danielle was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, carrying years of grief. Malik died 3 years ago, IED in Afghanistan. Before he deployed that last time, he spent every spare moment with Amira, teaching her, drilling her, making her promise she'd keep practicing even when he was gone. Her eyes glistened. He knew. Somehow he knew he wasn't coming back, and he wanted to leave her with something that would make her strong. Carter felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? Or are you sorry that my daughter might be better than your paying students? The accusation hung in the air. Carter wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat. Finally, he said, both, maybe, but that doesn't mean I can't help her develop properly. Danielle stood to leave. Just don't punish her for being good at something her father died teaching her. After she left, Carter sat alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he watched Amira practicing basic strikes on a heavy bag, her form perfect, her focus absolute. Other students gave her a wide berth now, creating an invisible circle of isolation around her. The afternoon brought a new complication. Amira sat alone in the dojo's small library area, studying technique manuals during a break, when Master Liang appeared beside her. She jumped slightly, not having heard him approach. Your stance earlier, Liang said softly, sitting down across from her. Liang reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wooden token, about the size of a coin. It was carved with intricate symbols that Amira didn't recognize. Do you know what this is? She shook her head. This is a training insignia. Many years ago, I taught a joint military program overseas. American soldiers training with traditional methods. Your father was one of them. He placed the token on the table between them. He was exceptional, not because he was strong or fast, but because he understood that martial arts is about balance. Internal and external. Power and restraint. Amira picked up the token carefully, running her fingers over the carved symbols. You knew my dad? Briefly, but I remember him clearly. He asked questions that most soldiers never think to ask. Not about how to hit harder, but about how to fight without losing yourself. Liang smiled gently. He'll be very proud of you. Tears pricked at Amira's eyes, but she blinked them back. Sensei Carter thinks I'm a problem. Sensei Carter thinks many things. Not all of them are wise. Liang stood slowly, his old joints creaking. Keep that token. It belonged to your father. He left it with me for safekeeping. I think it's time it returned to his family. After Liang left, Amira held the token tightly, feeling a connection to her father that had been missing since his death. The carved wood was warm in her palm, worn smooth by years of handling. That evening, the dojo's bulletin board gained a new poster. Regional Youth Martial Arts Championship, open registration. The tournament was 6 weeks away, featuring age divisions from 8 to 17, with categories for different skill levels. Winners would advance to state competitions. Tyler stood in front of the poster with his friends, his expression calculating. She's going to sign up. You know she will. So what? Jason replied. She'll get destroyed by real competition. Maybe. But what if she doesn't? Tyler's voice dropped lower. What if she actually wins something? Then Carter will definitely give her that scholarship. She'll be here permanently, taking spots from people who actually pay. The next morning, Tyler made his move. He approached Amira during warm-ups, his voice loud enough for others to hear. Hey, I saw you looking at the tournament poster. You thinking about entering? Amira finished her stretch before responding. Maybe. You should. I mean, if you're so good, prove it. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Unless you're scared of real competition. Other students had stopped their warm-ups to listen. The challenge was clear, public, and designed to corner her. I'm not scared, Amira said quietly. Then sign up. Let's see if that lucky hit was really skill. Carter watched the exchange from across the room. He should intervene, redirect the conversation. But part of him wanted to see what Amira would do. Would she rise to the bait? Would she let ego push her into something she wasn't ready for? Amira stood and walked to the bulletin board. She took one of the registration forms and filled it out carefully, her handwriting neat and deliberate. When she finished, she placed it in the submission box and returned to her warm-up without a word. Tyler's smirk faded slightly. He'd expected hesitation, maybe fear. Instead, she'd simply accepted the challenge and moved on. That night at home, Danielle discovered the registration form in Amira's bag. "Baby, what is this?" "A tournament." Tyler said, "I should prove myself." Tyler said. Danielle sat down heavily on the couch. "You're letting that boy push you into competition? You don't have anything to prove." "Yes, I do." Amira's voice was firm. "Everyone at that dojo thinks I don't belong. They think Dad taught me party tricks. This tournament will show them what he really taught me. And what if you get hurt? What if you lose?" Amira pulled out the wooden token Master Liang had given her. Master Liang knew Dad. He said Dad would be proud of me. I want to make that true. Danielle wanted to argue, wanted to protect her daughter from inevitable disappointment and potential injury. But she saw Malik's determination in Amira's eyes, that same stubborn commitment to proving himself that had driven him through every challenge. "If you do this," Danielle said slowly, "you do it right. No shortcuts, no excuses. And if you lose, you learn from it with grace. I promise." What neither of them knew was that across town, in Master Liang's small apartment above a tea shop, the old master was preparing his own plans. He'd seen something in Amira that reminded him of why he'd devoted his life to martial arts in the first place. Not trophies or recognition, but the art itself, the discipline, the philosophy. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Marcus, it's Thomas. I want to work with Amira personally. Train her properly for this tournament." Carter's response came after a long pause. "Why?" "Because you're training her to win. I want to train her to understand. There's a difference. I know how to produce champions. I know. I've seen your trophy wall." Liang's voice was gentle but firm. "But this child isn't a trophy waiting to happen. She's a legacy that needs guidance. Let me help her honor her father's memory properly." Carter wanted to refuse. Letting Liang train Amira felt like admitting he couldn't do it himself. But he also knew Liang's reputation, knew the depth of knowledge the old master possessed. "Fine, but she still follows my curriculum." "Of course. I'll work with her after regular classes." Over the following weeks, Amira's training intensified. Regular classes with Carter focused on competition techniques, tournament rules, and strategic thinking. But after the other students left, Master Liang would arrive, and the real teaching began. He taught her to find stillness in motion, to feel an opponent's intention before they moved, to understand that every fight was a conversation, and the goal wasn't to shout louder, but to listen better. "Your father called it the flow technique," Liang explained one evening. "But it's much older than that. It's about becoming like water, strong enough to wear down mountains, but flexible enough to find every crack, every opening." Amira absorbed everything. Her body already knew the movements from her father's teaching. Liang helped her mind understand the why behind each technique. Meanwhile, Tyler's resentment grew. He watched Amira improve daily, watched Carter give her more attention, watched other students begin to respect her despite their initial mockery. His friends had stopped actively harassing her after their shoes-hiding incident, but Tyler couldn't let it go. One afternoon, he confronted Carter directly. "Sensei, are you really going to let her compete? She barely knows our system." "She knows enough," Carter replied curtly. "But it's not fair. Some of us have been training here for years." Carter turned to face Tyler fully. "Life isn't fair. The tournament isn't fair. If you're worried about losing to her, train harder." The dismissal stung. Tyler left the dojo that day with his humiliation complete. At home, his father barely looked up from his phone when Tyler tried to explain what was happening. "Sounds like you need to focus more," Richard Brennan said absently. No support, no understanding, just the constant pressure to win, to be better, to prove his worth through victory. 3 days before the tournament, the dojo held mandatory sparring rehearsals. All registered competitors had to participate to ensure they understood tournament protocols and safety rules. The atmosphere was electric with nervous energy and competitive tension. Carter stood at the center of the mat, clipboard in hand. Today we simulate real tournament conditions. 3-minute rounds, point scoring system, same rules you'll face Saturday. I want to see control, technique, and sportsmanship. He began calling out matchups. Advanced students against advanced students. Beginners against beginners. The matches unfolded with varying degrees of skill, but most were respectful and well executed. Then Carter called out the pairing that made the entire room go silent. Tyler Brennan versus Amira Johnson. Tyler's head snapped up. Amira remained still, but her fingers tightened slightly on the water bottle she'd been holding. Sensei, one of the other instructors, said quietly, "They're in different age brackets and different skill." "I know what brackets they're in," Carter interrupted. "This is practice. I want to see how Amira handles pressure from a more experienced opponent." The truth was more complicated. Carter had been watching Tyler's growing resentment and wanted to address it directly. Let them spar under controlled conditions, work it out of their systems before the actual tournament. He told himself it was good teaching. He didn't examine why he wanted to see this particular matchup. Tyler walked to the center of the mat, his expression a mixture of eagerness and anger. This was his chance to put her in her place, to show everyone that her previous victories were flukes, to restore the natural order where kids from wealthy families who'd trained for years were better than poor kids with dead dads and charity lessons. Amira approached more slowly. She bowed respectfully to the mat, then to Tyler. Her expression was calm, but her eyes showed focus that seemed beyond her years. "Keep it controlled," Carter reminded them. "Touch strikes only for face contact. Body shots can have moderate force, but no excessive power. 3 minutes on the clock." Tyler bowed mockingly, his movement exaggerated and theatrical. Amira's bow was simple and sincere. The timer started. Tyler attacked immediately, not bothering with the feeling-out process that usually began sparring matches. He came in hard with a combination he'd practiced for years: jab, cross, low kick. But Amira wasn't where the strikes landed. She'd sidestepped before he'd fully committed, reading his intention from his weight shift. His next combination came faster, harder. She deflected, redirected, used minimal movement to avoid maximum damage. Around the mat, students leaned forward. This wasn't the tentative sparring of practice. This was real. "Stop running," Tyler snarled, breathing harder now. "I'm not running. I'm moving." Amira's voice was steady. Tyler charged again, abandoning technique for aggression. He grabbed at her GI top, trying to pull her off balance for a throw. Amira twisted, broke the grip, and suddenly Tyler was the one off balance. A simple sweep, and he was on the ground. Carter should have called a point, should have reset them. But he didn't. He wanted to see more. Tyler scrambled up, his face red with exertion and humiliation. The other students were silent now, watching with intensity. Jason looked uncomfortable. Even the instructors were paying close attention. The next exchange happened fast. Tyler threw a spinning back kick, powerful but telegraphed. Amira ducked under it, came up inside his guard, and struck, controlled but precise, 3 touch points in rapid succession. Ribs, shoulder, neck. Each one would have been scored in a real tournament. "Point," one of the assistant instructors called out reflexively. Tyler ignored it. He launched another attack, this one with an edge of desperation. His punches were wide, his kicks losing form. Amira's father's training kicked in automatically. She read every movement, anticipated every strike, and her counters became more fluid, more effortless. Then Tyler made a mistake. He threw a high kick that left him open, and when it missed, he stumbled. Amira could have struck, could have scored easily, but she stepped back, lowering her hands, giving him time to recover. The gesture infuriated him more than any strike could have. He rushed forward with a yell, his technique completely abandoned now, fighting on pure emotion. Carter finally stepped in. "Stop." Tyler reset position, but Tyler didn't stop. He swung wildly at Amira's head. She ducked, and in one smooth motion, swept his legs and controlled his fall. He hit the mat hard, but not dangerously, and before he could react, Amira had stepped back with her hands raised in a non-threatening position. The room was absolutely silent. Tyler lay on the mat, chest heaving, staring up at the ceiling. The humiliation was complete and public. Every student had witnessed it. Every instructor had seen him lose control, lose form, lose everything that was supposed to make him superior. Carter's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Tyler, sit out the rest of practice. Go cool off." Tyler got up slowly, not looking at anyone. He walked to the edge of the mat, grabbed his water bottle, and kept walking straight out of the dojo. The door slammed behind him. Amira remained standing in the center of the mat, breathing steadily, her expression showing no triumph or pride, just calm awareness. Carter approached her. "Where did you learn to control an opponent like that?" "My father said a fight should end when both people have learned something. I waited for him to learn. And what if he didn't want to learn? Then I had to teach differently." Carter studied her for a long moment. In that simple exchange, she'd shown more maturity than students twice her age. More maturity than Carter himself possessed some days. He thought about calling for the next match, but something made him hesitate. "That's enough practice for today," he announced. "Everyone cool down and stretch. Good work." As students dispersed, Master Liang appeared from where he'd been observing near the equipment room. He approached Carter with an expression that was difficult to read. "Your pride blinds your teaching," Liang said quietly. Carter bristled. "I'm running a successful dojo. My students win tournaments. You taught Tyler pride, built greatness. Look where it led him. Tyler lost control. That's on him." "Is it?" Liang's voice was gentle but firm. "You put him in that match knowing his ego was fragile, knowing he needed to dominate her to feel worthy. You set up a lesson, but who was it really for? Him or you?" The accusation hit harder than Carter wanted to admit. "I wanted to see how she'd handle pressure. You wanted to see if your ego was justified, if she was as good as you feared she might be." Liang placed a hand on Carter's shoulder. "Pride built your dojo, but it's destroying your humility. And without humility, you cannot truly teach." He walked away, leaving Carter standing alone in the emptying dojo. That evening, Amira sat in her bedroom, staring at her father's photograph and the wooden token Master Liang had given her. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear or exhaustion, but from the weight of what had happened. She heard crying coming from the bathroom. Through the thin walls, she could hear her mother on the phone with someone, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. She's so young. What if she gets hurt? What if all this brings back the pain of losing Malik?" Amira's throat tightened. She hadn't realized her training was causing her mother such worry. There was a soft knock on her door. Danielle entered, her eyes red but her expression gentle. She sat on the edge of Amira's bed. "I heard what happened at practice today. I didn't mean to embarrass Tyler." "I know, baby, but I also heard something else." Danielle pulled out her phone and showed Amira a video. Someone had recorded the match and posted it online. The caption read, "10-year-old girl outclasses teenage brown belt with pure technique." The video had been shared dozens of times already. Comments ranged from amazed to skeptical to supportive. Amira's face was clearly visible. "Tomorrow everyone will know," Danielle said softly. "The tournament isn't going to be just about martial arts anymore. People will have expectations, opinions. Some will want you to win. Others will want you to fail just to prove the video was a fluke." Amira was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, I overheard you on the phone. If you don't want me to compete, I won't." Danielle's eyes filled with fresh tears. She pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm scared, yes, but I'm also so incredibly proud of you. Your father would be too." She pulled back, cupping Amira's face. "Just promise me something. Promise me you'll fight for the right reasons. Not to prove anything to Tyler or Sensei Carter or anyone else. Fight because it honors what your dad taught you. I promise." After her mother left, Amira looked at herself in the mirror. The reflection showed a small 10-year-old girl in a worn t-shirt, clutching dog tags that belonged to a father she'd never see again. But in her stance, in her eyes, there was something else. Something that whispered of discipline and legacy and quiet strength. She closed her eyes and heard her father's voice one more time. "Control is stronger than power, baby girl. Remember that. When she opened her eyes, her reflection stood taller. The girl in the mirror looked ready, not for victory or glory, but for something more important. She looked ready to remember, to honor, to carry forward something that death hadn't been able to destroy. Outside her window, the city lights of Atlanta glowed against the dark sky. In 3 days, the tournament would begin. The real test was coming. Saturday morning arrived with a crispness in the air that made everything feel sharper, more real. The venue was the Atlanta Sports Complex, a massive facility with 3 separate competition areas. Banners hung from the ceiling, displaying logos of national martial arts organizations. Vendors sold equipment and energy drinks. The smell of floor mats and nervous sweat filled the space. Amira stepped through the entrance doors wearing a crisp red GI top that Danielle had saved for weeks to afford. Beneath it, hidden against her chest, hung her father's dog tags. The metal was cool against her skin, a constant reminder of why she was here. She carried the wooden token Master Leung had given her in her pocket, her fingers brushing against it periodically for reassurance. The gymnasium buzzed with activity. Hundreds of competitors from dojos across Georgia milled around registration tables. Parents clutched coffee cups and cameras. Coaches gave last-minute instructions to nervous students. Judges wearing official blazers reviewed clipboards and discussed bracket assignments. Danielle walked beside her daughter, one hand resting protectively on Amira's shoulder. "You okay, baby?" "I am okay, Mom." They found the registration table for the youth division. A volunteer checked Amira's name against the roster and handed her a number to pin on her GI. Competitor 73. She was placed in the 10 to 12 age bracket, lightweight division. As they moved away from the table, whispers began to follow them. People pointed. A few held up phones, comparing Amira to the viral video that had spread across social media. One man elbowed his companion and said loudly enough to be heard, "That's the girl from the video, the one who took down the teenager." Amira kept her eyes forward, but her jaw tightened slightly. Carter's elite students had claimed a section of bleachers near competition ring 2. Tyler sat among them, his expression dark and closed off. He hadn't spoken to anyone since walking out of practice 3 days ago. His father sat 2 rows behind him, already on his phone, barely paying attention to the event his son had trained months for. Carter arrived last, carrying equipment bags and looking more tense than his students had ever seen him. He spotted Amira and Danielle and made his way over. "Ready?" "Yes, Sensei," Amira replied quietly. "Your first match is in 45 minutes. Ring 2. Warm up slowly, don't waste energy. Stay hydrated." He paused, then added more softly, "You've trained well. Trust your preparation." It was the kindest thing he'd said to her since she'd walked into his dojo weeks ago. Amira nodded, sensing the shift in his tone. Master Leung appeared from the crowd, moving with the quiet grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in martial arts. He carried a small bag and gestured for Amira to follow him to a quieter corner. Once away from the crowd, he opened the bag and pulled out a strip of white cloth. "Your father wore this during his final tournament before joining the military," Leung said, wrapping the cloth around Amira's wrist. "It's tradition in some schools. A reminder that we carry our teachers with us always." Amira touched the cloth reverently. "Thank you, Master Leung. Remember, this is not about winning or losing. This is about honoring the art, honoring your father. Everything else is just noise." The announcement came over the loudspeaker. "Competitors for Ring 2, preliminary rounds, please report for warm-ups." Amira's stomach fluttered, but she pushed the nervousness down. She joined a group of competitors stretching near the ring. Most were older than her, taller, more muscular. A few eyed her with curiosity. Others dismissed her entirely, assuming her small size meant she'd be easy to beat. The first match was called. 2 12-year-old boys faced off in a flurry of kicks and punches. The match was energetic but sloppy, both fighters relying on aggression over technique. The judges awarded points generously, and the bout ended with the taller boy winning by 3 points. Then Amira's number was called. She walked to the center of Ring 2, her heart pounding but her breathing controlled. Her opponent was a boy named Derek Patterson, 11 years old, several inches taller, wearing a green belt from a dojo in Marietta. He looked confident, relaxed, like this was just another match in a long season of competitions. They bowed to the judges, then to each other. Derek's bow was casual. Amira's was respectful and precise. The referee signaled to start. Derek came forward immediately with a high roundhouse kick, testing Amira's reactions. She shifted back smoothly, the kick passing inches from her face. He followed with a combination, jab, cross, low kick, standard tournament strategy. But Amira had seen this pattern before, had practiced against it with Master Leung dozens of times. She didn't retreat. She stepped inside the combination, redirecting his jab, slipping past his cross, and delivering a clean reverse punch to his midsection. Point red, the referee called. The bleachers erupted with surprised murmurs. Danielle's hands flew to her mouth. Carter leaned forward, his expression intense. Derek reset, more cautious now. He circled, trying to find an opening. Amira mirrored his movement, her stance balanced, her weight distributed perfectly. Every lesson from her father, every drill with Master Leung, every principle of the flow technique manifested in her stillness. Derek attacked again, this time with a spinning back kick. It was powerful, fast, meant to overwhelm. Amira anticipated it from his hip rotation. She sidestepped, and as Derek completed his spin off balance, she delivered a touch kick to his back. Point red. Derek's confidence evaporated. His coach shouted instructions from the sidelines, but Derek was fighting with emotion now instead of strategy. His next attack was wild, overcommit. Amira used his momentum against him, stepping aside and delivering a controlled strike to his shoulder as he passed. Point red. Match. The referee raised Amira's hand. The crowd applauded, some more enthusiastically than others. Derek looked stunned, unable to process how completely he'd been controlled. Amira bowed to him deeply, sincerely. Derek hesitated, then returned the bow with visible respect. As they left the ring, he said quietly, "You're really good." "Thank you. You're fast." I had to stay focused. The simple kindness in her response seemed to ease his disappointment. He nodded and walked back to his team. Danielle rushed down from the bleachers, pulling Amira into a tight hug. "That was amazing, baby." "It's only the first match, Mom." "I know, but still. You were perfect." Carter approached, his expression unreadable. "Good control. You didn't waste movement. Your timing on that final counter was excellent." He paused. "Stay loose. Your next match is in 30 minutes. Over the next 2 hours, Amira advanced through 3 more preliminary matches. Each opponent was different. One relied on speed, another on power, a third on deceptive footwork. But Amira adapted to each style, reading patterns, staying calm, executing her father's teachings with precision that seemed impossible for her age. By the time she reached the semifinal round, word had spread through the tournament. Judges exchanged glances when her number was called. Parents recorded her matches on phones. Competitors from other divisions stopped to watch. Tyler watched every match from his seat in the bleachers, his expression growing darker. His own preliminary matches had been adequate, but not impressive. He'd won on points, not dominance. And now this girl, the charity case who'd humiliated him in practice, was moving through the tournament like a quiet storm. His father finally looked up from his phone during Amira's 4th match. "That's the Johnson girl you were complaining about?" "Yeah. She's good. She got lucky." Richard Brennan snorted. 4 matches isn't luck, son. That's skill." He returned to his phone, dismissing the conversation. Tyler's hands clenched into fists. The semifinal match was announced. Amira would face a 12-year-old boy named Christopher Hayes from a dojo in Columbus. Christopher was undefeated in his last 10 tournaments, known for aggressive combinations and excellent conditioning. His coach was a former national champion, and Christopher carried himself with the swagger of someone who expected to win. As they faced off in the ring, Christopher sized Amira up and smirked. "You ready to lose gracefully?" Amira's response was soft but steady. "I'm ready to learn." The answer seemed to confuse him. Christopher's smirk faded slightly. The match began, and Christopher came out like a hurricane. His combinations were sharp, powerful, constant pressure designed to overwhelm opponents quickly. For the first minute, Amira retreated, absorbing the onslaught, reading his rhythm. Carter gripped the edge of his seat. "Come on, fight back," he muttered. But Master Liang, standing beside him, smiled slightly. "She is fighting. She's letting him reveal himself." Christopher grew frustrated as none of his strikes landed cleanly. He increased his aggression, his combinations becoming less controlled. And that's when Amira shifted from defense to counteroffense. She caught his next kick mid-motion, redirected it, and used his own momentum to sweep his supporting leg. Christopher went down hard, but safely. Before he could fully process what happened, Amira had stepped back, hands raised, allowing him to stand. Point red. Christopher scrambled up, his face flushed with exertion and embarrassment. His coach shouted for him to stay focused, but Christopher's composure was cracking. The next exchange was faster. Christopher threw a spinning back fist, powerful but telegraphed. Amira ducked under it, came up inside his guard, and delivered a perfect combination. Body strike, shoulder strike, controlled touch to the neck. Each one precise, each one scoring. Point red. Match. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Even competitors from other dojos were impressed, recognizing technical excellence when they saw it. Christopher stood frozen for a moment, then slowly bowed to Amira. This time, there was genuine respect in the gesture. "How?" he asked simply. "My father taught me to move with the fight, not against it." Christopher nodded, processing this. "Your dad's a good teacher." "He was," Amira said softly. "Thank you." As Christopher left the ring, Carter felt something shift in his chest. Pride, certainly, but also something more complicated. Shame. Because watching Amira bow with such genuine respect, seeing how she honored even opponents she defeated, reminded him of lessons he'd forgotten years ago. Master Liang appeared beside him. "You just witnessed humility defeat pride." Carter didn't respond. He couldn't. The words stuck in his throat. The judges announced the results. Amira had advanced to the championship final. Her opponent would be determined by the other semifinal match currently underway in Ring 1. Amira sat on a bench with her mother, sipping water, trying to process everything. Her body ached pleasantly from exertion. The dog tag beneath her GI felt heavier somehow, more present. "How are you feeling?" Danielle asked. "Tired, but good. You're making him so proud. You know that, right?" Amira touched the cloth wrapped around her wrist. "I hope so." The announcement came 15 minutes later. Her final opponent would be Reese Hamilton, 15 years old, a regional prodigy from Savannah who'd been training since age 5. Reese had won his semifinal match by complete domination, ending it early with a combination so fast his opponent never had a chance to counter. Murmurs spread through the crowd. This wasn't going to be competitive. Reese was bigger, stronger, more experienced. The finals would be a formality, everyone assumed. The real story was that a 10-year-old girl had made it this far. But as the arena lights dimmed slightly in preparation for the final match, and Amira closed her eyes to center herself, something shifted in the atmosphere. The crowd sensed it. The judges sensed it. Even Reese, warming up on the other side of the ring, glanced over at the small girl in the red GI and felt the faintest flicker of uncertainty. The locker room was cold and smelled of disinfectant. Amira sat on a metal bench, icing her left arm where Christopher's kick had connected during the semifinal. The impact hadn't been dangerous, but the repetitive strain from 5 matches was taking its toll. She pressed the ice pack against her forearm and breathed slowly, centering herself for what came next. The door opened and Carter entered, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his expression harder to read than usual. "That was good work out there," he said. His tone was sharp, businesslike. "But don't let those wins go to your head. Reese is a different level. He's been competing nationally for 3 years. You've been in my dojo for less than 2 months." Amira looked up at him, her expression calm. "I didn't win, Sensei. I just didn't quit." The response stopped Carter cold. He'd expected pride, maybe nervousness, possibly false confidence. Instead, she'd given him wisdom that sounded like it came from someone decades older. What did you say? My father used to tell me that winning means the other person stopped trying. Not quitting means you're still learning, still growing, even when you're tired or hurt or scared. She adjusted the ice pack. I haven't won anything yet. I just kept going. Carter stared at her for a long moment. In that simple statement, she'd revealed more about martial arts philosophy than he'd taught in years. He wanted to say something, wanted to acknowledge the truth in her words, but his ego wouldn't let him. Just stay focused. Don't embarrass the dojo. He left without waiting for a response. Alone again, Amira let out a slow breath. She wasn't angry at Carter's harshness. She understood it better than he probably realized. He was fighting his own battle, one that had nothing to do with tournaments or techniques. Her father had once told her that the hardest opponents weren't in the ring. They were in the mirror. Later that afternoon, Carter sat in an empty office at the complex, old tournament footage playing on his laptop. But he wasn't watching current matches. He was watching videos from 15 years ago, back when he'd been competing himself under Master Liang's guidance. The young Marcus Carter on screen moved with grace and confidence. But there was something else too. Humility, respect. Every bow was sincere. Every victory was celebrated with restraint. Every loss was accepted with dignity. When did I lose that? He whispered to the empty room. He clicked to another video. This one showed him teaching his first class at the newly opened dojo. He was so excited back then, so passionate about sharing knowledge rather than collecting trophies. The students in that early class were terrible, uncoordinated, hopeless. But he'd been patient with them, encouraging, focused on their growth rather than his reputation. The door opened. Master Liang entered without knocking, as was his habit. He sat down in the chair across from Carter without invitation. You set up that practice match with Tyler, Liang said. It wasn't a question. I wanted to test her under pressure. You wanted to test her ego. You wanted to see if she was as good as you feared she might be. Carter's jaw tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? You've been teaching pride, disguised as excellence, for so long you've forgotten the difference. Liang leaned forward, his voice gentle but uncompromising. I trained you to win, yes. But more importantly, I trained you to understand. Victory without wisdom is just noise. Strength without compassion is just violence. My students win tournaments. They get college scholarships. They build confidence. Do they? Or do they build arrogance? Liang gestured toward the door, toward the tournament beyond. Tyler can barely look at himself after losing to Amira. Not because he lost, but because his entire sense of worth was built on never losing. You taught him that. You taught him winning was the only thing that mattered. Carter wanted to argue, wanted to defend years of teaching philosophy and successful competition records. But the words died in his throat because Liang was right. He'd watched Tyler's spirit break in that practice match, had seen the boy's confidence shatter not from the defeat itself, but from the realization that defeat was unacceptable. What am I supposed to do? Carter's voice came out rougher than intended. Remember why you started teaching. Remember what martial arts is supposed to build in people. Liang stood slowly. That girl out there is carrying her father's legacy with grace and humility. She's teaching your students more through her example than you've taught them in years. Maybe it's time you learn from her too. After Liang left, Carter sat alone with his thoughts and his old videos. Somewhere in the building, competitors continued warming up for final matches. The sounds of feet on mats, controlled breathing, coaches giving last-minute instructions filtered through the walls. He closed his laptop and made a decision. Meanwhile, in the main gymnasium, Danielle sat in the bleachers surrounded by other parents. Several had approached her between matches, praising Amira's sportsmanship, commenting on her technique, asking who her coach was. One mother had even said, "She reminded my son why he started martial arts in the first place. Not to beat people, but to challenge himself." The words had brought tears to Danielle's eyes. Now she watched the other final matches concluding in different rings. The energy was different from the preliminaries. Finals brought out the best and worst in competitors. Some rose to the challenge with grace, others crumbled under pressure. Parents screamed instructions. Coaches paced frantically. The atmosphere was thick with expectation and anxiety. Danielle pulled out her phone and looked at a photo of Malik. It had been taken at their wedding, both of them young and hopeful, the future stretching out before them like an open road. He'd been so certain about everything back then, so confident that discipline and training could prepare someone for anything life threw at them. "I hope you were right," she whispered to the photo. "Because our daughter is about to face something I don't think either of us prepared her for." In a different section of the bleachers, Tyler sat with his team. His own matches had gone poorly. He'd advanced to semifinals, but lost to a competitor from a Savannah dojo, defeated by someone who'd read his aggressive style and countered it with patience. The loss had been complete and humiliating, and his father had barely commented on it before returning to work emails. Now Tyler watched other competitors celebrate victories with their families, watched coaches offer genuine encouragement even to students who'd lost, watched Amira sitting quietly with her mother. No elaborate coaching staff, no expensive equipment, just genuine love and support. Something broke inside him. Not dramatically, not with any grand realization. Just a quiet cracking of the shell he'd built around himself. The armor of arrogance and entitlement that he'd thought made him strong, but had only made him brittle. Jason sat down beside him. "You okay, man?" "No," Tyler admitted. "I'm really not." Before Jason could respond, a figure approached. Amira stood at the edge of their section, holding a towel. She looked nervous, uncertain if she'd be welcome. "What do you want?" Tyler's voice came out harsher than intended. Amira extended the towel toward him. "I saw your match. You fought really hard. That guy from Savannah was good." Tyler stared at the towel, then at her face. There was no mockery there, no superiority. Just genuine kindness from someone who had every reason to gloat over his failures. "Why are you being nice to me?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "I've been awful to you." "Because being good at fighting doesn't mean much if you're not also good at being human." She set the towel on the bench beside him. "You're talented, Tyler. You just fight too angry. Your technique is really strong when you're calm. I watched your first match this morning. When you were relaxed, you were amazing." The compliment, coming from someone he'd tried to crush, was almost too much. Tyler felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. "I'm sorry. For the shoes, for the comments, for all of it." Amira nodded. "I know. It's okay." She walked back to her mother, leaving Tyler staring after her in stunned silence. Jason punched his shoulder lightly. "Dude, she just destroyed you with kindness." "I know," Tyler whispered. "I know." As the afternoon progressed toward the final matches, the atmosphere in the complex intensified. The championship rounds were always the main attraction. Bleachers filled with spectators who'd arrived just for this part of the tournament. The judges took their positions with increased gravity. Even the lighting seemed brighter, more focused on the competition rings. Amira found a quiet corner to prepare mentally. She'd watched Reese Hamilton's previous matches on the monitor screens scattered throughout the venue. He was extraordinary, fast, powerful, technical, confident. Every movement was executed with the precision of someone who'd trained thousands of hours. His coaches were former national champions. His dojo was one of the most prestigious in the Southeast. Master Leung appeared beside her, as he often did, moving so quietly it was almost supernatural. "Nervous? A little. He's really good. So are you. But that's not what will decide this match." Leung sat down cross-legged on the floor, inviting her to join him. "What does your father's teaching tell you about facing a stronger opponent?" Amira thought carefully. That strength isn't just physical. That patience can defeat power. That the person who stays calm longest usually sees opportunities others miss. Good. And what else? That every fight is a conversation. You have to listen before you can respond effectively. Leung smiled. "Your father taught you well. So in this final match, what will you do?" "I'll listen. I'll watch. I'll wait for him to tell me how to beat him." "Perfect. Remember, this boy has been told he's exceptional his entire life. He's been praised and celebrated and never taught real humility. That's his weakness. Your strength is that you know you still have so much to learn." Amira touched the wooden token in her pocket, the cloth around her wrist, the dog tags beneath her GI. 3 physical reminders of legacy and teaching and love that transcended victory or defeat. "Master Leung, what if I lose?" "Then you lose with dignity, learn from the experience, and become better because of it. He stood slowly. But I don't think you will lose. I think you're going to remind everyone in this building what martial arts is really about. The announcement echoed through the loudspeaker. Final match for Youth Division, 10 to 12 lightweight. Competitors, please report to Ring 2. Amira stood, her heart pounding but her breathing steady. Danielle hugged her tightly. Remember, I'm proud of you no matter what happens. I know, Mom. I love you. I love you too, baby. Now go show them what Amira Johnson's daughter can do. As Amira walked toward Ring 2, the crowd parted slightly to let her pass. Some people offered words of encouragement. Others simply watched with curiosity and anticipation. Carter stood near the ring entrance, and as she approached, he did something that surprised everyone watching. He bowed to her, deeply, respectfully. Your father would be very proud, he said quietly. And so am I. Now go out there and honor what he taught you. Amira bowed back, her eyes glistening. Thank you, Sensei. The arena darkened slightly as spotlights focused on Ring 2. The championship final was about to begin. The spotlights felt warm against Amira's skin as she stepped onto the mat in Ring 2. The noise of the crowd faded into a distant hum, her focus narrowing to the space before her. The judges sat elevated at three sides of the ring, their expressions neutral and professional. The referee stood center, waiting for both competitors to assume their positions. Across the mat stood Reese Hamilton. At 15, he was nearly a foot taller than Amira, with the build of someone who'd spent years conditioning for competition. His red GI bore patches for national tournaments, evidence of a trophy case that probably needed its own room. His black hair was cut short. His stance radiated confidence that bordered on arrogance, and his eyes assessed Amira with the calculating gaze of someone who'd already decided this would be quick. The announcer's voice boomed through the sound system. In the red corner, representing Carter's elite martial arts, competing in her first regional tournament, Amira Johnson. Polite applause, some genuine cheers from people who'd watched her earlier matches. Danielle stood in the bleachers, hands clasped together as if in prayer. In the blue corner, three-time regional champion, representing Savannah Elite Training Center, Reese Hamilton. Louder applause. Reese had fans here, students from his dojo who'd traveled to watch their star compete. His coach, a stern-looking man with graying temples, nodded approvingly from ringside. The referee gestured both competitors to the center. They stood face to face, the height difference stark. Reese looked down at Amira with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. You've had a good run, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. But this is where it ends. You ready to lose gracefully? Amira met his gaze calmly. The words were meant to intimidate, to plant seeds of doubt. She'd heard similar challenges before. Her response came soft but unwavering. I'm ready to learn. The answer seemed to confuse him, just as it had confused Christopher earlier. Reese's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. Suit yourself. They backed to their starting positions. The referee raised his hand. Bow to each other. Reese's bow was perfunctory, mechanical. Amira's was deep and sincere, honoring not just her opponent, but the art itself. Fighters ready? The referee's hand dropped. Begin. Reese exploded forward immediately, his strategy obvious from the first second. Overwhelming speed, relentless pressure forced his smaller opponent to make mistakes through sheer intensity. His opening combination was textbook perfect, a jab to measure distance, followed by a cross aimed at her head, then a low kick targeting her lead leg. The jab missed by inches as Amira shifted her head. The cross met empty air as she swayed back, her weight perfectly balanced. The low kick swept through the space where her leg had been a moment before. She'd read every movement from his shoulder rotation, his hip positioning, the subtle weight shifts that preceded each strike. Reese reset and attacked again, faster this time. A spinning back kick that carried serious power. Amira dropped low, letting it sail overhead, then came up smoothly as he completed his rotation. No counterstrike. She simply returned to her ready stance. The crowd murmured. Carter leaned forward in his seat, tension visible in every line of his body. Master Liang stood calmly beside him, arms folded, a slight smile on his weathered face. Reese's confidence remained intact, but frustration flickered in his eyes. He'd expected her to crumble under the initial assault, to retreat to the edge of the ring and fight defensively. Instead, she stood centered, balanced, moving minimally but effectively. He tried a different approach. Instead of single combinations, he launched a sustained attack. Strike, 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 no pause between movements, try to overwhelm her processing speed. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut, low kick, high kick, spinning back fist. Amira became water. She flowed around his attacks, slipped between openings, redirected force rather than absorbing it. Her father's training had prepared her for exactly this kind of pressure. Don't fight the storm, he'd taught her. Move with it. Find a calm center and stay there. 30 seconds of sustained aggression, and not a single clean strike landed. Reese stepped back, breathing harder than he'd expected to be. His coach shouted instructions from the sideline, but the words barely registered. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was 10 years old, in her first real tournament, facing a 3-time champion. She should have been overwhelmed by now. Point blue. The referee's voice cut through Reese's thoughts. He'd been so focused on his confusion that he'd missed it. While resetting his stance, Amira had stepped forward and delivered a clean touch strike to his midsection. Nothing aggressive, nothing excessive, just perfect timing and placement. The crowd erupted in surprised cheers. Danielle's hands flew to her mouth. Tyler, watching from the bleachers with Jason, leaned forward unconsciously. Reese's expression darkened. He'd just been scored on by a child. The humiliation cut deeper than any physical strike could have. He reset his position, and when the referee signaled to continue, Reese abandoned strategy entirely. He charged forward with pure aggression, his techniques still clean, but his mindset shifted from tactical to emotional. He threw everything: rapid combinations, spinning techniques, jumping kicks that showcased his athletic ability, but left him momentarily vulnerable. Amira saw it all. Saw how anger made his movements predictable. Saw how ego made him overcommit. Saw exactly what Master Liang had predicted, that Reese's greatest weakness was never having been taught true humility. She waited, watched, listened to what his body language told her. Reese launched a jumping, spinning hook kick, powerful and flashy, the kind of technique that looked spectacular when it landed. Amira's response was almost invisible in its simplicity. She stepped to the side, letting his momentum carry him past her, and as he landed off balance, she delivered 2 quick strikes, one to his ribs, one to his shoulder. 2 points, Red. The gymnasium exploded with noise. People were standing now, phones recording, coaches from other dojos watching with genuine interest. This wasn't just an upset in the making. This was a masterclass in technique versus power, patience versus aggression, philosophy versus ego. Reese's composure shattered. He could hear his coach screaming instructions, could feel the weight of 3 years of victories suddenly threatened by a little girl who shouldn't even be in this division. His next attack was desperate, all technique abandoned for raw emotion. He threw a wild combination, overextended, left himself completely open. Amira could have struck hard, could have delivered a decisive blow that would have ended the match immediately. But instead, she caught his wrist mid-strike, redirected his energy, and swept his legs in one fluid motion. Reese hit the mat hard but safely, Amira's control ensuring he wasn't injured. Before he could process what happened, she'd stepped back, hands lowered in a non-threatening position, allowing him the dignity of standing without interference. The referee's hand shot up. Point, Red. Match. For 3 full seconds, the gymnasium was completely silent. Then the applause began. Slow at first, from a few scattered spectators who recognized what they just witnessed. Then building, growing, until the entire venue was on its feet. Not just polite tournament applause, but genuine recognition of something extraordinary. Amira stood in the center of the ring, breathing steadily, her expression showing neither triumph nor pride, just quiet awareness. She turned to face Reese, who was still sitting on the mat, staring up at her with an expression of complete disbelief. She extended her hand to help him up. Reese looked at the offered hand, then at her face, then back at the hand. Slowly, he took it and let her help him to his feet. They stood face to face again, but this time the dynamic had completely shifted. Ow! Reese's voice came out rough, genuine confusion overwhelming his earlier arrogance. How did you do that? My father taught me that control is stronger than power, Amira said softly. That winning isn't about beating someone. It's about understanding them better than they understand themselves. Reese's eyes glistened. He was 15, had built his entire identity around being unbeatable, and in 3 minutes a 10-year-old girl had dismantled not just his technique, but his entire philosophy. The revelation was crushing and liberating at the same time. He bowed to her, deeply, respectfully, the kind of bow that acknowledged a genuine teacher, regardless of age or size. Amira returned the bow with equal respect. The referee raised Amira's hand. Winner, by unanimous decision, Amira Johnson. The gymnasium exploded again. Camera flashes lit up the space like lightning. Reporters who'd been covering other divisions rushed toward Ring 2. Parents pulled out phones to record the moment. Competitors from other weight classes crowded around to get a better view. Carter stood in the crowd, motionless, his expression complex and unreadable. Master Liang placed a hand on his shoulder. Now do you see? This is what teaching should build. Not champions obsessed with winning, but people who understand why they practice. Carter's voice came out barely above a whisper. I've been doing it wrong. For years, I've been doing it all wrong. Not wrong. Incomplete. Liang squeezed his shoulder gently. But you can learn, just like she learned from her father, just like you once learned from me. It's never too late to remember what matters. Danielle pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. She pulled Amira into a crushing hug, not caring about the cameras or the spectators. Your father, she managed between sobs. Your father is so proud right now. I can feel it. I know he's watching. Amira held her mother tightly, the emotion she'd been holding back during the match finally breaking through. I didn't win, Mom. I just remembered everything he taught me. Baby, you did so much more than win. You showed everyone here what martial arts is really supposed to be about. The awards ceremony happened in a blur. Amira stood on the highest position of the podium, the gold medal heavy around her neck. Reese stood on the second position, and Christopher Hayes on the third. As the announcer read their names and accomplishments, cameras clicked and the audience applauded. But the real moment happened after the ceremony, when the crowds dispersed and the chaos settled. Carter approached Amira in the competitor staging area, where she sat with her mother, carefully placing her medal in her old gym bag. He stopped a few feet away, and for a long moment he didn't speak. When he finally found his voice, it was different than Amira had ever heard it. Softer, vulnerable. I owe you an apology. The words came slowly, each one deliberate. When you walked into my dojo, I judged you. Your clothes, your background, your lack of experience in my system. I saw you as a charity case, maybe a feel-good story, but nothing serious. Amira started to speak, but Carter held up a hand. Let me finish. You taught this dojo something I forgot a long time ago. I got so caught up in winning, in building a reputation, in producing champions, that I forgot what we're actually supposed to be teaching. Discipline, yes. Technique, absolutely. But more than that, character, respect, humility, control. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Your father taught you all of that, and you've been teaching it to my students just by being yourself. Sensei, I watched you refuse to strike when you could have. Watched you help your opponents up. Watch you show more maturity at 10 years old than some of my advanced students show at 16. Carter's eyes were bright. You reminded me why I started teaching in the first place. Not to create winners, but to create good people who happen to know martial arts. He bowed to her then, not the perfunctory bow of sensei to student, but a deep, sincere bow of respect between equals. When he straightened, there were tears on his cheeks. Thank you for teaching me, he said simply. Amira stood and returned the bow. My dad always said the best students teach their teachers new things. Thank you for giving me the chance to train. The moment stretched, meaningful and transformative. Then Carter smiled, genuine warmth breaking through years of carefully maintained authority. Come back to the dojo Monday. We have a lot of work to do, and I have a lot of teaching methods to rethink. 3 weeks later, Carter's elite martial arts academy looked the same from the outside. Same building, same windows, same sign. But inside, everything had changed. The dojo hosted a special ceremony on a Saturday morning. Students filled the mat in neat rows, but the atmosphere was different now. Less rigid, more warm. The competitive tension that had once defined the space had softened into something healthier. Students still pushed each other to improve, but now they celebrated each other's growth rather than just victories. Carter stood at the front of the room, wearing his black belt and his most formal GI. Behind him, Master Leung sat in a place of honor. Beside the mat, Danielle and Amira waited, both dressed in their training clothes. "Thank you all for coming today," Carter began, his voice carrying the authority of experience, but now tempered with humility. "We're here to recognize something important. For too long, this dojo measured success by trophies and titles. We celebrated winning and sometimes forgot to celebrate growth, effort, and character." He gestured to the wall where tournament photographs had always hung. "I'm not taking down these photos. They represent real accomplishments, real dedication. But I'm adding something else." 2 students stepped forward carrying a new frame. They hung it beside the championship photos. The new frame held a simple quote in elegant lettering. "Control is stronger than power. Respect is stronger than victory. Learning is stronger than knowing." Amira Johnson, U.S. Army Special Forces. Below the quote was a photograph of Malik in his military uniform, his black belt visible, his smile proud and strong. The photo Amira had carried in her bag now held a place of honor in the dojo. Carter's voice continued, thick with emotion. Amira Johnson never trained at this dojo, but his teachings have transformed it. Through his daughter, we've all learned what true martial arts mastery looks like. Not domination, not intimidation, but discipline, respect, and humility. He turned to Amira. "Amira Johnson, please step forward." Amira walked to the center of the mat, her heart pounding. She had no idea what was happening. Carter reached behind him and picked up a folded piece of fabric. A black belt, worn and faded, with Malik's name embroidered on one end. Master Leung had brought it, saying it had been with him for safekeeping since Malik's death. "This belt belonged to your father," Carter said, his voice gentle. "He earned it through years of dedication, training, and service. Master Leung has held it in trust, waiting for the right moment to return it to your family." He held it out to Danielle, who approached with tears streaming down her face. She took the belt carefully, reverently, holding it like the precious artifact it was. "But we have something else," Carter continued. He picked up a second belt, white, pristine new. "In our tradition, you would start at white belt and work your way through the ranks. But you already carry your father's teaching. You already embody the principles we're supposed to spend years developing. So today, we honor your journey and his legacy." He tied the white belt around Amira's waist, his movements precise and ceremonial. "This is not an earned belt. This is a learning belt. It recognizes that you're at the beginning of your formal training with us, but you carry advanced understanding of what martial arts truly means." The students bowed in unison, a sign of respect that was completely voluntary, completely genuine. But Carter wasn't finished. "There's one more thing. This dojo will establish the Malik and Amira Johnson Scholarship Fund. Full training for any student who demonstrates not just ability, but character. Because financial means should never be a barrier to learning discipline, respect, and self-control." The students applauded. Tyler, sitting in the front row, clapped the loudest. After the ceremony, as students dispersed to begin regular Saturday training, Tyler approached Amira hesitantly. He held out a small wrapped package. "This is for you," he said, his voice uncertain. "Well, it was mine, but I want you to have it." Amira unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a black belt patch, the kind students earned for reaching advanced rank. Tyler's name was embroidered on it in gold thread. "Tyler, I can't." "Yes, you can. You deserve this more than I ever did. I earned it through years of training, but you earned something better. You earned actual understanding." He smiled self-consciously. Besides, I'm going to earn it again. The right way this time. With heart, not just technique. Amira looked at the patch, then at Tyler's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced with genuine humility and determination. Thank you, but I'm not taking this as mine. I'm holding it for you. When you earn your belt again the right way, I'm giving this back. Tyler's eyes widened. Deal. They shook hands, and something that had been broken between them mended in that simple gesture. Later, during regular training, Carter called all students to attention. Before we begin drills, I want to make an announcement. Amira has agreed to help me teach a new class. Beginning next month, we'll offer free self-defense and discipline training for younger children in the community. Amira will be my assistant instructor. The students applauded again. Amira felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment and pride. She's 10, someone whispered, and she has more to teach than most 20-year-olds, Carter replied firmly. Age doesn't determine wisdom. Understanding does. The training session that followed was different than any before. Carter corrected techniques with patience rather than criticism. He praised effort as much as success. He reminded students that their training partners were teammates, not obstacles to overcome. And when he demonstrated a complex combination, he invited Amira to show an alternative approach, one that used less power but equal effectiveness. The students watched both versions with equal respect, beginning to understand that martial arts had many valid expressions. That evening, Danielle and Amira sat at home, the gold medal on the kitchen table between them, Malik's belt folded carefully beside it, the wooden token from Master Liang, and the white cloth he'd given her rested nearby. Your father would be so proud, Danielle said softly. Not just of winning, but of everything you've become. Do you think he knows? Wherever he is. Danielle reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. I think he knew before you did. I think that's why he spent every spare moment teaching you. He knew you'd need it, knew you'd use it to help others, not just yourself. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Amira spoke again, her voice small. Mom, I miss him. I know, baby. I miss him too. Every single day. But when I'm training, when I'm teaching others what he taught me, it feels like he's still here somehow. Danielle squeezed her hand. That's because he is. Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about being continued. Every time you help someone, every time you choose control over anger, every time you show respect, that's your father living through you. Over the following months, the transformation of Carter's dojo continued. The scholarship fund grew as community members donated. The free children's classes filled immediately, with Amira helping teach basic discipline and respect to kids as young as 6. Tyler became one of Amira's strongest supporters, often partnering with her during demonstrations and defending her when new students questioned why a 10-year-old was teaching. His own technique improved as his attitude shifted from proving superiority to seeking understanding. Master Liang visited more frequently, pleased to see his former student rediscovering the true purpose of teaching. He worked with Amira privately, deepening her understanding of her father's flow technique, helping her articulate the principles so she could teach them more effectively. The tournament video had gone properly viral now, with millions of views across various platforms. The title was always some variation of 10-year-old girl defeats teenage champion with pure technique. But the comment section had become something unexpected, a discussion forum about martial art philosophy, about teaching methods, about the difference between winning and understanding. Several other dojos reached out to Carter, asking about his new teaching methodology. He always gave the same answer. I stopped teaching winning and started teaching wisdom. Everything else followed naturally. 6 months after the tournament, Carter made one final change to the dojo. He renamed it. The new sign read, The Flow Legacy Martial Arts Academy, in honor of Amira Johnson and his daughter Amira. The unveiling ceremony was emotional. Danielle cried openly. Master Liang bowed deeply to Malik's photograph. The students stood in respectful silence, understanding that they were part of something bigger than themselves now. Carter gave a speech that day, simple and heartfelt. This dojo belongs to a little girl who walked through our doors with nothing but her father's teaching and her own courage. She transformed us. She reminded us what matters. And now, every student who trains here will carry that legacy forward. 1 year after that first day, when Amira had walked into the dojo in her worn sneakers and faded t-shirt, she stood teaching a class of new students. She was 11 now, slightly taller, more confident, but still possessing that same quiet dignity that had defined her from the beginning. She taught them her father's core principle: control is stronger than power. She taught them Master Liang's wisdom: listen before you respond, understand before you act. She taught them Carter's reformed philosophy: train to become better people, not just better fighters. And most importantly, she taught them by example, showing respect to everyone, treating victories and defeats with equal grace, never using her skill to intimidate or dominate. Late one evening, after all students had gone home, Amira stood alone on the mat. The dojo was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of Atlanta traffic outside. She held her father's dog tags in one hand, the wooden token in the other. She bowed to Malik's photograph on the wall. "I kept my promise, Dad. I didn't just fight. I remembered. I shared. I helped others." For just a moment, she could have sworn she felt his presence. Warm, proud, eternal. The wind chimes Carter had hung near the office door rang softly, though there was no breeze. Outside, Danielle waited in the car, watching her daughter through the dojo windows. She saw Amira bow to the photograph, saw the peaceful expression on her child's face, and felt the weight of grief finally transform into something gentler. Not absence, but continuation. Not loss, but legacy. Amira joined her mother in the car, and they drove home through the lit streets of Atlanta. Behind them, the dojo stood quiet but purposeful, a place where a little girl's courage had sparked transformation that would ripple forward for generations. The whole gym had finally listened, not because someone had shouted louder, fought harder, or demanded respect, but because one small girl had stepped onto the mat with nothing but her father's wisdom, her mother's love, and her own unshakable conviction that control was stronger than power. And in learning that lesson, everyone around her had become stronger too. The wind chimes rang one more time in the empty dojo, a gentle sound like laughter, like approval, like a father's whispered pride carried on the evening breeze. The legacy lived on, growing with each student taught, each life touched, each moment when someone chose understanding over aggression. The journey that began with mockery ended with transformation. And somewhere, in the spaces between what we see and what we feel, Amira Johnson smiled. When someone underestimates you because of how you look or where you come from, do you prove them wrong with anger or with quiet strength that leaves them speechless? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us what true power really looks like.